There's no handout yet for tonight, so I brought some scratch paper. There'll be a handout for tonight on Friday. So, but we're going to talk, and there you go, scratch the paper. We're going to discuss, let's see, Bereshit chapter 5. We're going to talk about verses 7 through 15. We're examining what happened to humankind that required a flood, and so far we found out that we have greed, vanity, sloth, laziness, hate, anger, jealousy, envy. We have truth versus falsehood. What we're going to find out tonight is that the spiritual versus material. And we're going to see that a lot of these things we can apply personally to ourselves, but we also see these things manifesting in society as a whole a lot in the same way as they manifested themselves in society as a whole prior to the flood. So we're going to look at it, I guess, from two planes. From the physical plane. We're also going to consider it from the spiritual plane. But when we look at verse 7, it simply says, "And Seth lived after he begot Enosh 807 years, and he begot sons and daughters." Now, we talked about Seth. It means compensation. And in our first study of this, we found out that in the fact that Adam lived 130 years, we dug down into the gematria of the numbers and came up with an idea that 130 represented our ability to perceive the word of Elohim, to perceive the Torah. And that within that, it also embodied the Shema, and that we were to listen to it, perceive what it says, discern it. And then we were responsible for proclaiming it after we understood it, and not only proclaim it, but apply it to our own lives, and to be content in it. So we see a lot of things happening in the first part of this genealogy, but now we've come to a point where Seth begot Enosh. In other words, this compensation we just talked about, what allows us to have a walk with Elohim through His Word, is now sent forward to Enosh, which is a word or a name that means frail, weak. It means mortal. So we get an idea that it's being given to a weakened humanity, a weakened humankind. So we come now to verse 7, and it says, "And Seth lived after he begot Enosh 807 years, and he begot sons and daughters." So, and he begot sons and daughters. We have an idea in sons and daughters, Ben and Bat. They both come from a root, which is Bana, which means to establish, to repair, to restore, and it's Bana. So in sons and daughters, we can say sons and daughters represent becoming established and restored. Okay? So now what we ask is, what established and restored? Well, the only thing we have left to think about is the number 807. Now, from last week's study, we remember that 800 is actually broken up into 8, which 8 has a root from, from Shemoneh. It has a root in Shema that means to be fat, rich, robust. What we're seeing here is a state of being pretty healthy. Okay? 100 is in the word meot. Meot, which we get an idea of what it is that makes us fat, rich, robust. What makes us healthy in our relationship with Elohim is that, first of all, we have a covenant that comes through the word of Elohim, that if we will pay attention to this covenant that comes through the word, then we will be healthy, spiritually healthy. Now, we also have in this the final form of pay. The final form of pay equals 800. Now, pay means mouth, it means communication. It also represents the word. But it also, if we look at it, the construction of it is composed of the final form of kaf with a yod in the middle of it. What we see is a container that contains the truth, power, and the ability of Elohim. That if we pay heed to the word and are joined in the covenant, not only will we grow fat, rich, and robust in our relationship with Elohim, but also we will be filled with the very spirit of Yahuwah, which is Mashiach. So we get an idea that something very special was happening in the birth of Seth and what Seth was going to pass on to his generation. Now, what about 7? We still have the 7 left behind. 7, we've said, represents the Zion. And in the Zion we see sword. So it represents protection. It represents nourishment. In the 7th day, it's the 7th letter of the alphabet. The 7th day Elohim rested, so it represents the rest that we find in Elohim, in his Shabbat. Now, 7 is the word Shiva, but it comes from a root Shabbat, which means to take an oath. So now we say, if I take an oath and I attach myself to the covenant through the word, then my relationship is complete, because 7 is also a number that represents completion. So in this we also see that here's the Zion, here am I, and if I attach myself to the Zion, if I yoke myself to the Zion, then again it brings me back to the letter 8, which is the Het. So in 807, what I have to understand is this compensation that goes to a weak humanity, that comes to me when I'm in my weakened state, is what allows me to be strengthened. It's what feeds me so that I can grow spiritually fat. It's what protects me when I'm down and I'm being beaten up by whatever I'm allowing myself to be beaten up by. It has a lot of benefits in this. Now, the world at this time was singing, is what it was doing, and so we're going to turn that off. All right, there was the entertainment. Okay, so the world at this point is struggling. Humankind is struggling, and they're struggling right now. They're struggling with these things. But we're about to have a flood. So if we understand the purpose of 807 years and begot sons and daughters, it is the fact that we yoke ourselves to the Word through Mashiach, and this is what brings us restoration, what establishes our relationship with Elohim. if we have that part down, then we can go to verse 8 that says that, and all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. Okay. So we say all the days of Seth, and then we can say, and he died. If we say between those two things, we understand that the opportunity to take advantage of yoking ourselves to Elohim through His Word and through His anointing, that this is limited to doing it while we're alive. We have to take action while we're breathing. Can't very well make teshuvah when we're dead, because at that time we're already in the presence of Elohim, and we're trying to explain why we didn't make teshuvah when we were living. So we have to do this while we are alive. So we understand that all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. That in that it says, during his lifetime were 912 years. So we consider 912 years. We say, okay, what can we get from 912 years? First of all, we consider the word 9. The root of the word 9 is sha'ah. It means to look, to regard. So in 9, we have an idea of pay attention to. Pay attention to. To what? We say, what else do we know about 9? Well, we know that the 9th letter of the Aleph Beit is Tet. And in Tet, we've talked about it a number of times, that we have a choice. We can, as the Vav, we can bow down before the Zion. In other words, we can worship our Elohim through His Word. Or we can crawl on our bellies like a snake. Something else that we consider in 9, or actually in 900 specifically, is that 900 is the numerical value of the final form of Zadi. So there again is our choice. Do we crawl on our bellies like the serpent, simply living for the materialistic things of the world? Or do we strive in our life to be righteous? Because again, we have, in 9, we also have the word, once again, me'ot, which represents what? The covenant that we have in the word of Elohim. So what are we saying in 900 in and of itself? That we have to pay attention to the word of Elohim by the power of Mashiach in order to be within the covenant, to be able to make or perceive, to discern the difference between crawling on our bellies like the snake or being raised up in righteousness. What is the difference between leading or trying to lead a righteous life and not trying to lead a righteous life, or leading a self-righteous life? And these are things that we consider. Now, when we look at 12, we have the word asar, which actually means 10, okay? And then we also have a word for 2 that, well, let's do the 10 first. This 10 comes from a root which is similar to it, which is ashar, which means to grow rich. Okay? So that takes us back into, in what way do I grow rich? Am I growing rich in the things of Elohim? Because if I grow rich in the things of Elohim, I'm never going to lack in the things in the physical world. Yeshua says, if I will seek first the kingdom, the reign of Elohim and its righteousness, then everything else that I need is going to be added to me. But what am I seeking to grow rich? We have another illustration that Yeshua gave us is the guy that was, I mean, his harvest was just popping out the seams, and he says, I've gotten so rich, I'm going to tear down my barns and build new ones so that I can pack it all in there. And Elohim says, you fool, tonight you're going to die. So, what is being wealthy? Is it being wealthy in my relationship with Elohim, where it doesn't make a difference if I get run over by a car later on this evening? I have a relationship that I've started now, and I'm wealthy in that relationship? Or is becoming wealthy having the big bank account that I get plowed by the car, I don't have a relationship with my Elohim, and, well, it doesn't matter because I can't take it with me? Best case scenario is to have both. But the most important scenario is to have that relationship, because the rest of it will be added. You won't have to worry about anything. So the 10th part means to grow rich. If we look at the 2, as far as the 12 goes, the word is shanaim for 2, but it comes from the root shana. Shana, which is shana, which means to repeat or to alter or change. So, to repeat or to alter or to change. Now, the question that we ask is, what does this have anything to do with my relationship and how I follow the Word? Now, to repeat the Word is to stay within the confines of what the Word says and stay on the narrow path, without trying to change the Word to suit my situation, but rather I'm changing myself in order to suit the Word in my relationship to Elohim. I'm not trying to change the Word to make it easier for me. I'm trying to change myself to stay on that path in my relationship with Elohim. Okay? So, in 912 years, what do we see? That within our lifetime, we have to pay attention to what is written in the Word in order to stay within the confines of the covenant that Yeshua paid for, and that our goal should be to grow rich within our relationship with Elohim and allow Him to provide for us, as opposed to trying to grow rich ourselves and lose sight of Elohim. And keep that in mind, because when we go on here in a few minutes, this will come back up. But to get to a point where I know the Word, I know where I'm supposed to be walking, and it becomes a natural thing, that I'm not trying to change it to suit myself. I'm letting it change me to bring me into a relationship. This happens within my lifetime. And that's the context of verse 8. Now we go on and says, and Enosh lived 90 years and begot Kenan. Some books may say Canaan. Begot Kenan. So Enosh lived 90 years. So we say in the word lived, Haya, it means, well, of course, to live, to be, to exist, but the root is Haba, which means to tell, to declare, or to show. So there was something that Enosh was going to tell, declare, and to show to Kenan, or bring forth to Kenan. And this is contained within 90. 90 is the numerical value of, anybody?